you guys are watching this video, we have finally crossed 600 subscribers. Once again, as always, thank you everyone who's found me, everyone who's stuck with me. Thank you for going through some videos that maybe weren't the best, because I'm trying my best to up our production each and every time. But now, we're going straight into one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. Possibly my favorite in terms of my lifetime views on wrestling. Definitely the first wrestler I ever truly adored. We're talking about the Macho Man, Randy Savage. Growing up, the Macho Man was my favorite wrestler. Despite the fact that I was born in '99 and my early years of being a wrestling fan were when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, Macho Man was my favorite because I was able to find old tapes of him. And then eventually there was a Macho Man DVD on Netflix I was able to watch. Everything about this guy just drew me in. The personality, the costumes, the colors, the poise, the wrestling ability, the high flying, the musculature. Macho Man is the perfect wrestler. I think for a lot of people when they think, oh, when cartoons, what's the generic idea of a wrestling personality? A lot of people seem to assume it's always Hogan, but really when you look at it, I think it's a mixture of Hogan and Macho. I think that they are really the 1A and 1B of wrestling. I think that they together make what made wrestling so great. And it's only fitting that after doing the top 10 Hogans and the top 10 Warriors, we finished the holy trinity of the golden age of wrestling with my top 10 Machos. Kicking off the list with this, the Masters of the WWE Universe NWO Macho. Now Macho had two figures. He had a more normal 80s Macho, but then he also had this. And for me, right, there were a lot of great figure character combinations in the Masters of the WWE Universe line, like Undertaker, Scareglow, perfect, makes sense. Something like Vicor and Ultimate Warrior, perfect. Jake the Snake with a Snake Man, meant to be, right? But this is the one where I would have never paired them in my head, but it makes so much sense. NWO and the Evil Horde, because both of them are outsiders coming into a place that has no natural defense against them and poisoning the soil itself. It's perfect. I was actually really hoping the line would go on long enough to give us more NWO members, but no, we only got the Macho. But still, this figure's so great. I love the head sculpt. The helmet does come off. The glasses don't, though, but I'm fine with that. I kind of prefer him keep his glasses on, to be honest. He has the Horde armband, Horde armor. If you take it off, it actually does have like a Madness t-shirt underneath. Let me see here. I forget how you do this. Yeah, there's claps here on the back. Doop, doop. And you can see, he just has his normal Madness shirt underneath. That's not as cool, so I prefer keeping the Horde armor on. But at the same time, I know that before Superstars came out, a lot of people were buying these figures just to have more, like, normal wrestling toys. I get it. I personally preferred them going more outlandish with the He-Man stuff while they were doing this line, but, you know, to each their own. Overall, this figure is not perfect. It's definitely not the best one on the list, but it's one that I've adored having all these years. I know a lot of people aren't big on the Macho King persona, at least nowadays, but for me, I adore the Macho King. When I was watching those DVDs, the videos on Netflix, I adored this whole concept, the idea that Macho would go bad and let his ego take over, essentially. Also, in WWE All-Stars, Macho King is his alternate costume, and it's this specific attire with the kind of checkerboard and the pink and green. Now, I don't think I've ever actually gone into it. WWE All-Stars is my favorite wrestling game, and one of my favorite games ever, just period. And a huge part of it is just that roster, how it introduced me to a lot of wrestlers that would go on to be my favorites. Like, I don't think I knew really who Jake the Snake Roberts was until after I played that game. Same thing with people like Eddie Guerrero. Well, not Eddie Guerrero. Like, I knew his WWE stuff, but that's what opened the door to me knowing his WCW stuff. And people like, I'm trying to think of the roster now. Roddy Piper is definitely one that I was introduced to mostly through that game. But just looking at this Macho, it's so good. I love everything about it. I love the colors. I love the crown up top. The glasses do come off, but, you know, the head sculpt's a bit rough. They did a Macho head sculpt, and they stuck with this for a few years, It doesn't look too good. It doesn't really look like him, but keep the glasses on him, keep the crown on him. That's what you do. Now, I will say this. The figure did not come with a shirt. The shirt is a custom shirt that I bought a few years back when I first got the figure. So, other than that, everything you see here is what you would get, and I think it's a decent enough Macho King. This one hurts. This one really hurts. For years, this was my dream Macho, and I wanted this figure so badly, because for a long time it was really expensive. Even now it is. It goes for like over $100 loose and damaged, like mine is. Simple fact of the matter is, I went years thinking I'll get it someday, maybe, and then I kept thinking, well, I guess the day's come and passed. But then Defining Moments Macho was seeming to get an upgrade, because there was supposed to be an Ultimate Edition Macho in this attire, and then it got canceled this year. So that was my impetus to go back and finally get a Defining Moments Macho, and I'll be honest, it kind of broke my heart. You spend years thinking of how great a figure is going to be. I honestly thought this was going to be the perfect Macho, and when I bought it, it was going to be like the centerpiece of my collection. And I get it, and it's fine. It's good. It's very good, even. But I had convinced myself for over a decade at that point that this was the perfect Macho Man figure. Original Defining Moments Macho is still great. I still love it. But it does kind of hurt to know that for years I was building it up to be something it could never be. Now, I hope that Ultimate Edition figure comes out eventually, or I hope that maybe Zombie Sailor does a full body one. He's doing an awesome looking retro Macho, like in this outfit. Can't wait for that. But I would like a more modern figure with this attire, if it's at all possible to get that at this point. LJN Macho Man is special to me because it was one of the first videos on TikTok that really blew up for me. A lot of people really seem to enjoy my review of this LJN Macho, and I gotta say, it's still one of my favorite retro figures. LJNs, of course, they're about 8-ish inches tall. They are more cartoony, but think about this, right? They came out in 1984, 1985, and the detail on them is spectacular. There was a point where these could have been considered some of the most accurate toys you could buy, just period. And even if I pulled in like a more modern figure, right? It's not like the likeness is awful. Like, you could potentially sell an age LJN figure today, and it be understood like, oh yeah, we're just going for like a cartoony style. And I think it would work. The LJN figures have aged incredibly well as long as you're fine with, them being made out of rubber and them not articulating. Me, I'm perfectly fine with that. I don't have many LJNs. I love all the ones I do have. And the absolute top of the heap is always going to be this Macho Man, who was also the first LJN I ever owned. It's an incredibly good figure, and an excellent first figure for Macho Man to have had in his career. Going for something that is vintage to something that is styled to be vintage, this is the Mattel Retro NWO Macho. Now, the Retro line did 2 Machos, I'm pretty sure. They did a Green Trucks normal Macho early on, and then later on they did NWO Macho. And once again, weirdly enough, this was the only NWO member they did until, like, literally this past year when they did the NWO 4-pack on Ringside. So for a long time, if you were a big retro collector, this was your only NWO representation unless you were customizing. And I think it's spectacular. Like, they do the Madness shirt, you have this great gritty expression. I do like the gimmick they gave him where it's the slam. I think it gives Macho a very powerful look. My one issue with it, and this is not an issue with this figure, when they did the NWO 4-pack, Scott Hall also has that action. And I think it would have been cool had they considered Macho had that and given Scott Hall something different. Like, maybe made him one of the, I'm trying to think, like, what bodies they have. You could do, like, one of the, clothesline poses, and that would kind of make him more in line with the vintage Razor Ramon figure. But aside from that very small nitpick, this figure is just spectacular. It's my favorite of the original run of retros, with the exception of maybe Kane and Mankind. And I think it's one that still holds up today if you are a retro collector, if you're a Hasbro collector, if you just enjoy Macho Man. This figure is pretty spectacular. I must be feeling the madness because we're going right back into an NWO Macho with this, the Ultimate Edition NWO Macho. I love that they gave you different shirts, different head sculpts, different, like, everything, different hands even. They did only give you the one bandana and the one pair of glasses, but I think that's fine because that's basically all he wore as NWO Macho. I just really adore this figure. It was one of my absolute favorites last year. It still is. In fact, if anything, it's just gone up in my estimation since then. I think everything about this figure is perfect, from the detail to the articulation to the silly face. I love that. I love his tongue out. It's so fucking funny. I know a lot of people were against that, but hey, look, they gave you a more stoic Macho if you would prefer that. So, this figure was so good, I had to get two, and that's actually something that's kind of rare for me, especially with wrestling figures. I prefer not to double up, but with one is good enough and has good enough alternate accessories, I'll go in on it. Looking at the second defining moments, Macho Man, this is the top 4 figures we're going into now, and this is where I need to make a distinction. There's a difference between favorite and best. We're ranking my favorite Macho Man. I think this is the best Macho Man. The defining moments Macho, it gives you the WrestleMania 3 attire. You get this wonderful jacket, the robe. You get the Intercontinental Championship belt. You get a really good head sculpt. Let me take the glasses off real quick. Looks far more like Macho than the other one did. The glasses fit into the hair incredibly well. Bandana. If you are a fan of Macho's early career, before he did the Macho King, before he started wearing the cowboy stuff, this is the perfect figure. It captures the best match he's probably ever had. That was the WrestleMania 3 match against Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Everything about this figure is just perfect. If he had double jointed elbows, he'd be even better, but he doesn't need them. I could honestly say that if you just want one Macho for your collection, one that will perfectly capture his energy, and you are a Mattel collector, get this one. There's a reason why I put him on the very top shelf with my preferred figures for each of the famous wrestlers from the 80s to the 90s. I think he captures Macho as a snapshot. That said, as much as I think this is objectively the best Macho, it's not my favorite. It never has been. I think that it is very, very good. Incredibly good. But it's not the one that I look at and think, yes, that's what I want to pull down. Yes, that's what I want to review. Yes, that's what I want to mess around with. This is a Macho that I point to when I say, hey, do you have a Macho suggestion? It's almost more like a transactional figure than it is a fun figure, I suppose. So, with that said, it more than deserves being at least in the top 4, but I don't think it gets on the podium for me. 3 is the most recent Macho Man figure I've gotten, aside from the Superstars one. This is the WrestleMania 2023 wave Macho King. So, he was meant to pair up with Dusty Rhodes, and yeah, he's just so good. I know it's not a good match, but Dusty Rhodes and Macho Man are 2 of my absolute favorite wrestlers ever, and I love this attire. Look at it. The yellow, purple on the hands, the crazy shit going down on his pants. Look at this. Motherfucker, like, butchered a rainbow to make these pants. It's so good. I still adore the Macho King gimmick. I do. And I adore this figure. It has one problem, right? They didn't paint inside the joint. That looks really bad. But aside from that, I adore it. I don't even care that it doesn't come from a top. It doesn't need it. It has a wonderful head sculpt. Here, let me pull the stuff off so you can see. Come on. Oop. This stuff can stick after a while. See? It has the really good Macho head sculpt. These glasses are just insane. You can see that there's just tiny spots of silver so that it can capture the light really well. And of course, the crown matches the scepter. It is really something cool. I think this was the first Macho King we've gotten in a long time, too. Like, I think the other Macho King I showed earlier was the one to come out before this one, and there was like 8 years separating them. Macho King doesn't get a lot of love, and I feel like this is probably the best Macho King figure I've ever had, that's ever been made, possibly. So, with all that said, he has to get my bronze medal. If he had the painting on the elbows, he might have been even higher, but this is where he can sit for now. Incredibly special to me because this was the first Mattel Macho Man I was ever actually able to put in my collection. This is the Target Legends Macho Man with the Macho Man t-shirt. I actually had that shirt as a kid. So, like, having that in figure form with this Macho that has the bandana, has the pink trunks, has the belt, and look at that, has the cream, has the little creamer for the cream of the crop promo. This is perfect. It has so many separate little accessories and details to make it the Macho Man of your mind's eye, especially if you're thinking of an 80s Macho Man. I adore this figure. I think it is in competition with the Defining Moments 2 Macho for being just the best Macho, period. And I really think that if I was being objective, this would be number 1. I mean, it is number 2, so it's not like I'm shortchanging it here, but I really adore this Macho. And it's also the Macho I always point out to Maddie, because Maddie adores the promo where Macho Man is pulling the coffee creamers out of himself in Mean Gene, seemingly at random. So, there's a lot of good memories attached to this Macho. It is the perfect Macho for the iconography of him as a man, him as a wrestler, and you can tell that Mattel was really trying to stretch the budget to get this guy in. They wanted to have so many little details and accessories that make this guy perfect. And if it wasn't for my own biases, this would have been number 1. Number 1 has to be the Hasbro Macho. The Hasbro Macho was in that first group of Hasbro figures I found, because I don't think I've ever told the story. I went to a flea market, and I had wanted to get into collecting Hasbros. I was probably about 18 at the time, and I went in. There was a flea market there. They had Hulk Hogan version 1, Hulk Hogan version 2, 2 versions of Ted DiBiase, one of the Bushwhackers, both of the Rockers, and Typhoon, and also Jake the Snake Roberts. But the big one they had was Macho. And this was what I needed. This was the one that convinced me, yeah, I need to do the Hasbro line. It's the one that made the Hasbros my favorite line. Because if I just got the other figures, right, I adored all of them. But it probably would have been similar to my vintage Star Wars collection or my Star Trek The Next Generation collection, where it's like, oh, I'll pick them up occasionally if I see them for cheap. But this Macho was the one that really got in me like, no, I want the full line. I want to actively pursue them. I want to add to them with the retros. I want to add to them with the third-party companies. This Macho is a huge reason why my collection is the way it is today. If I had an action figure Hall of Fame, as cornball as that sounds, I think this figure would be in it. It is one of the best Hasbros. It's my favorite Macho. And it was something that was like a gateway drug into my absolute favorite toy line. There's nothing else I can say. I think it's the perfect Macho Man. I think it's the most iconic Macho Man. And it is definitely the Macho Man at the number 1 on my list. There they are, my top 10 favorite Macho Men. I gotta be honest, doing the top 10 Hogans, top 10 Warriors, this is the top 10 I feel the best about. I think all these figures are spectacular. They look amazing together. And there's still some magic in Macho, you know? Hogan, he's gone on long enough to where we were able to see him break down and become, well, more of a cancer to the industry than a benefit. Warrior, we know the unfortunate side of his personality, as well as the fact that, well, maybe he never had the skills of the wrestling that a great number of his contemporaries had. But Macho, he's still, I don't know, there's still a sense of mystique and whimsy and just magic. Dare I say even madness to him. You don't really know where Macho Man the wrestler and Randy Poffo the man separate, and yet you can so clearly see that this was a man who loved wrestling and a man who, in many ways, made wrestling what it is today. So, with all that said, I gotta say, thank you, Macho Man, for being a huge part of my childhood, and thank you everyone who stuck around, did the subscriber thing, and joined the channel. So, thank you everyone for watching. if you liked what you saw, like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see what we get up to at 700. I think we're probably going to move away from the wrestling top 10s, but until we get there, thank you guys for joining up with me.